Hello and welcome back to Villa View for a very special episode, or even more than one episode. It's an exclusive interview with ex-Villa manager and ex-player John Gregory.
Massive deal for the channel, obviously, sitting down with such a Villa legend, and for me personally as well, one of my biggest heroes growing up. So let's get down to business.
So obviously you made the step up from Northampton to Aston Villa at the time, a few divisions. How was that sort of like level-wise to play at such a high level?
It was like a schoolboy dream, really. The initial signing for Villa, we were in League One. We got relegated that year, so we obviously went back into League Two, and I cleared off and went to Villa. So I had a great deal. You know, it was fantastic for me. I was early 20s, and I thought if I didn't sort of go at that particular time, I'd probably have stayed there for the rest of my life. But got the break, went to Villa Park. Met up with the likes of Brian Little, Andy Gray, Ron Saunders obviously was the manager, and it was a dream. It was an unbelievable dream for me to be in the same dressing room as those guys. The only time I'd ever seen them was on TV. They'd won the League Cup in '77 when we won at Old Trafford 3-2, and Brian scored the winner, and suddenly I'm in the same dressing room as them, and I'd never flown, believe it or not. I'd never ever been in an aeroplane. I'd never flown in an aeroplane ever in my life. And the pre-season we went off to Bilbao to play in a pre-season tournament. And that was the first time I'd ever stepped on a plane. You know, and I was early 20s, and I try and tell that story to sort of my kids and that, and they just laugh at me thinking I'm making it up, but it's the truth. That's how things were in those days. So yeah, it was an unbelievable experience to suddenly be playing for a club like Aston Villa. And you know, I warmed to it. I loved it. I was pretty fit. I could run cross countries and things like that. So I came in, and obviously pre-season's all about long distance running, cross countries, and Ron Saunders was cracking the whip, and I was able to compete because I was a good runner. But I couldn't beat Frank Carradus. I just could not get past Frank Carradus. He was an outstanding runner. I could beat John Burridge. I could beat Brian Little. Brian Little would always be at the back of the pack anyway because he never tried. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I really warmed to the chance of stepping up and becoming a sort of Premier League player as such. So it was great times.
What were like the facilities? Like, were they much different at Villa compared to Northampton?
Bodymore, oh yes, Northampton we had nothing. Bodymore Heath we had our own training ground, and at that particular time in 1977, not many clubs had their own training ground like us. We were, I think it had been built in 1975, and Bill Shankly famously said at the time that it's the best training ground in the country because it was ours, it belonged to us, and we were sort of very unique in that respect. So it was, you know, listen, it was chalk and cheese. I'd just come from the lower reaches of football to suddenly be, you know, a Premier League club as such, and having your own training ground and having lunch after training. I mean, that was just unheard of in my life. We actually had like a canteen where we could get food after training. So we were, you know, very unique in those days, and it was just for somebody like me, just coming from a very small club like Northampton. It was, you know, I had to pinch myself sometimes to realise just exactly where I was. But I was very grateful for the chance that Ron Saunders had given me, and I was prepared to grasp it as quickly as I could. And when he actually, you know, he used to say to me, I want you to play left back. Left back would get injured, and he said, can you play left back? I'd say, yeah, no problem. And obviously I got tagged with being a utility player, but it didn't bother me because I usually played, you know. I usually played somewhere in the team. Somebody would get injured or somebody was suspended, and I got moved into their position. So I would have sat in the stand most of that season had I not been so versatile. But I obviously played up front once. I played centre forward. Andy Gray got injured on the Saturday, and we played Spurs away on the Tuesday night. And Ron Saunders said to me, can you play up front? I said, yeah. And he gave me the number 9 shirt, and I played up front when Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa made their home debuts just after the World Cup in '78. And I played centre forward, and we beat Spurs at White Hart Lane, beat them 4-1, and I scored. And Brian Little scored, and Alan Evans scored. And Gary Shelton, I think, got the other one. We won 4-1 at Tottenham. And so, yeah, when Ron said, I want you to play here. I just said, yeah, no problem, I'll play there. So I got this tag of being sort of very versatile, and that continued. I think I wore every outfield shirt in the 2 years that I was a player. So very happy days for me.
How about the fact that you mentioned Saunders cracking the whip,
Yeah.
but what was he like? Because obviously he's one of the most successful guys ever to manage at Villa Park.
To me personally, he never ever said well done. He never patted me on the back. He never acknowledged that I did anything that was any good, and he was always knocking me down. And he had that kind of attitude with many of the players. Him and Brian Little had many run-ins. They didn't like each other. I think they respected each other enormously, but I think he found Brian that I have to say was always awkward. If you had to run around the pitch, Brian would cut across the corners, and if you were supposed to turn up in a shirt and tie, Brian would turn up in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. He'd do anything to try and upset Ron. How Brian ever became a manager, I'll never know. He was a complete rebel. Obviously, with his haircut, you've seen photographs of his hair in those days. He would, if anyone told him to get it cut, he just wouldn't. He'd be the opposite. But Ron was a tough guy to please, and I often remember you'd do shooting practice, and I'd have a shot and it would hit the bar, and he'd just turn around and say rubbish. And other players would shoot and hit the corner flag, and he'd never say anything to them. So he knocked me down, and I think it was just his way of controlling his players, not complimenting them too much. We played Manchester United at home. I scored 2 goals in the first half, and we were winning 2-0. And we went on to draw the game 2 each. And on the Monday, in those days, we used to get the Sun newspaper, and it would have like scores for the players, so many points out of 10. And on this particular day, I've picked up the Sun on the Monday, fully expecting to see that I've got 8 out of 10 and the star player because I scored 2 goals. And I've just read this comment where somebody has said, what do you think about John Gregory's performance? And Ron Saunders had said, he disappeared in the second half. He never once mentioned that I'd scored 2 goals. He just said, he disappeared in the second half. And that was his way really of just knocking me down and making sure that I didn't get above my station. So he was a hard man, very hard man to please, but I have to say he was a very fair man at the same time, and obviously he was extremely successsul in winning the league.
Were you ever like that with anyone, like how he was with you?
Yeah, he taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did teach me a lot of, somebody has a good game, it's don't say too much to them because they your feet does tend to leave the ground.
Yeah.
And we've certainly seen it at Villa Park over the years. Players have come along and played 1 or 2 good games and then disappeared off the face of the earth. And I think, in his own way, Ron was just trying to make sure that, as I said, my feet never left the ground, that my head remained the same size. And yeah, I learned many lessons from that, not to get too carried away because, if it's a 38-game season, it's no good just turning up and playing 1 or 2 good games. You have to be consistent over the period of the season, and obviously I tried to get players to play for me during my Villa time that were going to be there each and every week, not just 2-minute wonders. Somebody come along, score a couple of goals, and then you never saw them again. So yeah, I learned a lot from Ron.
What about Andy Gray? How was he to play? Because obviously he was the most prolific striker at the time. How was it having him in your team? Obviously it makes your job easier when you was in midfield.
Yeah, coming when I first joined, he was just he didn't know me. No one had ever heard of me, and he just welcomed me into the dressing room. I can remember clearly. It was just a big arm round. Yeah, he looked after me, and anything that you wanted, he said, anything you want, just come and see me. I'll organise it, sort it for you. He was a great guy to meet first and foremost. But he was on a Saturday, if you didn't play very well, he was the first one to let you know about it. Half-time team talks, sometimes Andy would take them because, the way he played. He was very swashbuckling style. He was very outgoing. When you played against Andy Gray, you knew you were in a football match. And likewise, if you were in the same team as Andy Gray, you had to perform like he did. So he was a brilliant player to play with. If you ever performed below the required standard, Andy let you know about it straight away. He didn't mince his words, and it was just great to have in the dressing room. And he was a big star, he was a huge star. Everywhere we went, everyone wanted a photograph with Andy. Everyone wanted Andy's autograph. He was a big star in those days and a huge threat to the opposition. And he obviously suffered quite a few injuries early on, and many a time we went into games without him. And that was somewhat down to the style that he played. As I said, he certainly let you know he was around when he played, and he never allowed the opposition to settle on the ball. He was in their face all the time, and off the field he was a great guy. He was a great guy to be around, and to this day, he's still the same sort of guy that you've seen on TV all these years. He was very much like that as a player.
Did you ever actually play up front with him when you were?
No, I played up front with Brian. I played up front with Brian for a couple of games, but no, Andy was. I often played in the team with Andy, but not as a striker. But yeah, he expected the best from you. But he had a great relationship with Brian, a playing relationship. Andy was extremely good in the air, and Brian was the skillful one.
Obviously, with your England caps you had as well, you played with some amazing players like Sir John Barnes, Francis, Cowans. Are they some of the best, or is there even more to touch on?
Hoddle to me was the best. I think that I sort of played alongside. I just couldn't believe his touch and his ability on the ball, left-footed, right-footed. They were identical. He was an incredible footballer. Some of the things that he could do with the ball. You could drop it in a bucket from 50 yards. Seriously, I could have a go at it, but he'd do it 9 times out of 10. He was just an incredible footballer. And he only got 50 odd England caps, which was quite sad. He always seemed to be the one that got left out. He couldn't get the ball back for you. I think probably that was his only weakness. When the opposition had the ball, he kind of waited until we got it back, and many times England managers left Glenn out of the lineup when really I think the team should have been built around somebody like Glenn Hoddle. He was an amazing footballer to play with, and when you actually work with these guys on the training ground and just see what they can do, he stands out as being an incredible football talent that really should have got far more caps than what he actually did. I wouldn't have applied for the job, mainly because I don't think I'd have had a cat and hell's chance of getting it. In fact, the Birmingham Mail had a picture on their front page of the 10 contenders for the Villa job, and I wasn't one of them. I'm thinking, as I walk out now, I think there might actually be a few boos, from the home fans, And I can remember turning to walk up to the dugout, and I actually got cheered, and I was gobsmacked. I can sense it now, even talking about it now. I can remember the feeling of walking up to the dugout, and it was almost like, I think they quite like me, and I was expecting maybe get things thrown at me and that kind of stuff. So so that was very pleasing.
If you enjoyed that video, why not watch another one? Click the video choices on screen now to go and watch them in full. And don't forget to subscribe. Click on our logo there on the left and press subscribe. Easy.